My friends, hello! This is my first, end of the year wrap up, big video, lists and stuff of everything that I did in 2021. I love these videos. I love watching them, kind of getting larger, aerial views of all of my booktube friends and what they read, what they liked, and blah, blah, blah. Even though this is coming out before the end of the year, I don't feel like I will, in all likelihood, listen to another audiobook this year. So the first one I felt comfortable doing for this sort of year wrap up is my top 5 audiobooks of 2021. And just to specify, these are definitely not books that came out this year or audiobooks that came out this year. These are just audiobooks that I listened to in the calendar year 2021. I don't know how much I've said about audiobooks, but I absolutely adore audiobooks, especially since I came into contact with the Libby app. If you don't know, they're not a sponsor or anything. I just think as a reader, you should know about this. Libby apps connect audiobooks from your local library to whatever device you use to listen to it. I just use my cell phone, as I think most people do. And it has changed how I have a reading life, because I'm always able to have 2 or 3 books I'm reading, because one is always an audiobook. I love listening to audiobooks while I do chores. I actually do it while I'm playing video games that I've either played before or something like a sports video game. And I find that incredibly cathartic, because I'm actively doing something that I can kind of mindlessly do, but also really get lost in a story. And it's just so much fun. Without further ado, let's talk about the top 5 audiobooks I had in this year. These are not ordered in any way. I couldn't really figure out how to order them, because there's a nonfiction book on here, a classic, just work of fiction, and then a couple of fantasy, and then a sci-fi. So there wasn't really a way for me even to compare the experiences I had. But these are 5 great audiobooks I would highly recommend to you. And with the exception of, no, actually all of these, for the most part, I have gotten from my local library and the Libby app. So my local library is awesome, so maybe yours won't be as available, but would highly recommend, if you've never done that, try it out, because it really is, it's a game changer for me and how I read. First one is the Expanse series. This is one of the full series that I read this year. Mostly, I think I read 2 books last calendar year, but primarily I listened to, that would be 7 audiobooks. I think I read 1. So I read 1 of these books, and the rest were audiobooks for The Expanse. The author is James S.A. Corey, and the narrator is Jefferson Mays. Now, if you don't know anything about this series, it's a classic sort of, how do I say this? Because some people just say classic space opera, but it's really not that. It's very expansive, really deals with the idea of humanity and its divisions, and how we divide amongst ourselves into different factions and territories, and how easily that can be manipulated and changed based on what happens around us. And I really love this series. But the great thing that this narrator does, and what makes this audiobook one of my favorites of all time, is the way that the different factions and the different types of people and aliens, well, I guess there's not really aliens, just different type of people that are in the universe, get identified through the narration. There's a bunch of made-up languages. The biggest one is the Belter language, of people who live sort of in far out space around the asteroid belt. And it's this amalgamation, and not bastardization, but just this complete squishing together of Chinese, French, Spanish, and English. And the way that the narrator, Jefferson Mays, makes this language come to life, and the people of these worlds come to life, you just recognize where people are in the universe, what their ancestry is, just by how they talk and how the book is narrated. It's done phenomenally well. Highly recommend The Expanse and listening to the audiobooks by Jefferson Mays. It's one of those rare series that I both read and listen to audio, but primarily is audio. Highly recommend. The first one is Leviathan Wakes. And Leviathan Wakes really kind of sets the stage. It is more like a classic, space opera. And then from there, the series, expands through space and through various mysteries, and changes a lot. Great characters. Highly, highly recommend The Expanse by Jefferson Mays. My next one is also sort of a larger series that I primarily listen to on audiobook. I've read a couple of them physical copies, but primarily audiobook, and that is The Dresden Files by Jim Butcher, and that is narrated by James Marsters. This is such a great book to listen to in audiobook because it's a first-person narrative, and so it's like, I did this, and it's sort of like, not sort of, it is like that old school detective style novel in a fantasy world. You probably know this. Harry Dresden is a private investigator in Chicago. In our regular world, it opens up in the year 2000. But in this world, there's like this secondary sort of magical world underneath everything. Other planes of existence, as well as like monsters in our own world. And it's just fantastic. And especially what Marsters does so well is he incorporates a lot of acting techniques into the audible narration. I don't just mean in like his like voice parts where he's saying something or when another character is saying something, although that is excellent. But because it's in first person, the telling of the story, he really takes moments seriously. He exhales at difficult parts, or you get the idea that even the narrator is reliving this experience with you as you listen to it. And I find it incredible. Really well done. It actually makes the character of Harry Dresden more relatable, I feel like, actually in the audiobooks than reading. In reading, sometimes he gets a little annoying to me in some of his, ways that he deals with people, let's say. But when it's a fleshed out character that I'm listening to, I like it better. So this is actually one of those books that I like listening to a lot better than reading, because the audiobook is so good. So I would definitely recommend that. Starts off with Full Moon. Is that right? I think so. No, Stormfront. Stormfront, Full Moon is the second one. Starts off with Stormfront, and again, just like with The Expanse, the first couple are sort of odes to that genre, the sort of like detective story, and it expands really, really well from there and starts building out this really interesting world and overarching story. So would recommend that as well. Next audiobook I really liked, and this is the last one sort of in the fantasy sci-fi genre, is The Lies of Loch, Lamora, written by Scott Lynch, narrated by Michael Page. This narrator, Michael Page, does a great job of matching his tone, his voice, his narrative style, for lack of a better term, with the sort of grunginess of the story. The Lies of Loch Lamora is about thieves in this Venice-like city, and they're trying to steal a ton of wealth, and I don't want to get more into the story than that, but it's this really down-to-earth kind of grungy almost story, and that's how this narrator speaks. He kind of has like I can't really do it, but like it matches perfectly the tone of the book, and he breathes a lot of really great life into the narrative. And the way the narrative is structured is a way I normally don't like, where there's a ton of flashbacks and like the time is moved around a lot to sort of like reveal the story to the reader. And so in some ways, as you're reading it, you feel like the author is sort of toying with you, but the way the narrator like portrays that is very fun, and like it feels like you're around a fire and there's this great storyteller telling you what's happening, this great tale of Loch Lamora, and I just enjoyed it fully. A lot of my friends have recommended this to me, especially Chris over at Chris Bookish Cauldron, about being a great audiobook, and he was completely right. I'm not even done with it yet, and it's in my top 5 of the year, so that will tell you how much it's struck me at the beginning, how good this audiobook is. Next up is a series that you guys know I fell in love with this year, and that is the Anne of Green Gables series by Lucy M. Montgomery. There are like 1,000 audiobooks available for this, and I'm sure many of them are very good. The one that I listened to was read by Susan O'Malley, and I thought she did a fantastic job, because if you know the story of Anne of Green Gables, you have to embody a lot of very different personas, and she does it so well, not just with Anne, although she does a great job with young, nervous Anne and sort of that whole energy, but also Maria Cuthbert and sort of this cranky exterior but soft-hearted older woman, to various people that come in and out of their lives, Matthew, just so much that Susan O'Malley does with the books. I strongly recommend finding that audiobook. I think it was like from 1998. It's so good, and she reads a lot of them up until I think the 5th one in this series that I read, and all of them that Susan O'Malley did, I really, really loved. Final audiobook I wanted to mention this year is really different from everything else. It's a nonfiction work read by the author himself, and that is of A Promised Land by Barack Obama. As you can probably guess by, I'm sure most everyone has seen a speech by Barack Obama. He's a very good speaker, very articulate, very likable and charming in the way that he speaks. But listening to the audiobook of his life is so genuine when you just listen to him. It doesn't feel like you're reading a book. It feels like you are sitting in Barack Obama's living room asking him some questions about his campaign and about his first years in office. It was such a delight. Obviously, that's something that I'm never going to do in my life, or, life would have to take some crazy turns for me to be able to sit in Barack Obama's living room and talk about his life. But I felt like I got that opportunity by reading this audiobook that he produced. He just puts so much pathos into it. It doesn't feel stilted or like stiff. Like sometimes it does when an author reads their own work, because they're not obviously professional narrators. But not so with President Obama. I really enjoyed it. Not only was it incredibly informative, but again, it just really helped you get into his mind space even more, which is what you want in a biography, by listening it to him. His cadence, he delivers like his jokes or his self-effacing nature really, really well. I just really enjoyed that book. Would strongly recommend it if you're looking for sort of an update on American politics or just more about what it means to be president. That's my top 5 audiobooks of the year. A very different spattering selection, but hopefully this helped out. Let me know what audiobooks you read, especially if there were books that I haven't read or listened to and you think would be helpful for me next year in 2022. As always, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe before heading out. First in, last out.